In a village not far from the great river, there lived a young man named Kwame. He was known for his charm and wit, his tall and handsome frame often attracting the attention of many women. But what made Kwame most famous in the village was not his looks, but his hunger for wealth. Kwame came from a humble family. His father, a fisherman, and his mother, a weaver, worked tirelessly to make ends meet. But Kwame, ever ambitious, dreamed of something more. He wanted a life of luxury, a life where he would never have to toil like his parents. As he watched the wealthier men of the village, dressed in fine clothes, owning vast lands, and living in grand houses, he promised himself that one day he, too, would rise to such heights. But his way of achieving this would not be through hard work. Kwame had a different plan in mind. Not far from Kwame's small hut lived Ya, a widow well into her 50s. Ya had been married to a wealthy trader, and after her husband's death, she inherited all his riches. Her house was the grandest in the village, with high walls and a golden gate. Her livestock grazed in the finest pastures, and her fields were always green and full of crops. But despite all her wealth, Ya was lonely. She had no children, and though many respected her, she lived in isolation. For Ya, her wealth was a blessing and a curse. One day, as Kwame passed by Ya's house, a thought struck him like lightning. He could marry her. Ya was older, but that didn't matter. With her wealth, Kwame could finally have the life he dreamed of without lifting a finger. He would be the envy of every man in the village. That evening, Kwame devised a plan. Over the next few weeks, he began visiting Ya, bringing her small gifts, fresh fish from the river, colorful beads from the market, and sweet words that dripped like honey. He praised her wisdom, admired her beauty, and pretended to listen intently to her stories about her late husband. Ya, who had been alone for so long, began to warm to Kwame's advances. Though she was much older than him, his attention filled her heart with joy, and she began to imagine a future where she would no longer be alone. The villagers whispered among themselves. "What is Kwame up to?" they wondered. "Why is a young man like him spending so much time with an older widow?" Some were suspicious, but others thought Kwame was just a kind-hearted soul offering companionship to a lonely woman. Finally, after months of courtship, Kwame asked Ya to marry him. He spoke of his love for her, how he wanted to take care of her, and how he would bring happiness back into her life. Ya, though cautious at first, believed Kwame's words. She agreed to the marriage, her heart filled with hope. The day of the wedding was one of the grandest the village had ever seen. The bride, though older, was radiant in her fine silk garments, and the groom, in his best attire, looked every bit the part of a nobleman. The feast lasted late into the night, with music, dancing, and laughter filling the air. But behind Kwame's smile was a secret. He cared nothing for love. His heart was focused only on the riches that now lay within his reach. For the first few months, life seemed like a dream for Kwame. He moved into Ya's grand house, enjoyed her late husband's fine possessions, and no longer had to work. He would walk through the village with his head held high, knowing that he now had everything he ever wanted. Ya, for her part, was a generous and loving wife. She showered Kwame with affection, cooking him the finest meals, and ensuring that all his needs were met. But as time passed, Kwame began to grow restless. Though he enjoyed the wealth, he found himself annoyed by Ya's presence. She was no longer the object of his affections. The excitement of the chase had worn off, and now she was just an obstacle to his complete enjoyment of the riches. Worse still, Kwame had started to notice the younger women of the village again. He would catch their eyes as he walked through the market, his fine clothes and newfound status making him even more desirable. Kwame started spending less and less time with Ya, often making excuses to leave the house for days on end. He would throw lavish parties with his friends, buying expensive drinks and gifts to impress them, all with Ya's money. Ya tried to remind Kwame that wealth should be used wisely, that he needed to be careful with his spending, but Kwame dismissed her words as the nagging of an old woman. In his eyes, the money was now his to do with as he pleased. Soon, rumors began to spread in the village. People whispered about how Kwame was neglecting Ya, how he was seen with other women, and how he had become arrogant and wasteful. The elders, who had once admired Kwame's rise, now shook their heads in disappointment. But Kwame didn't care. He had the wealth he had always desired, and nothing else mattered. One day, Ya fell ill. Her body, once strong, began to weaken, and she spent her days in bed, too frail to move. Kwame, seeing her illness as an inconvenience, began to distance himself even further. He stopped visiting her room and hired servants to care for her instead. He continued his lavish lifestyle, thinking that once Ya passed away, he would inherit everything and be free to do as he wished. But as Ya's condition worsened, she called for Kwame one last time. She asked him to sit by her side, to hold her hand as she neared the end of her life. "Kwame," she whispered, "take care of the wealth I leave behind. Help those in need, care for my family, and use what I have given you wisely." Kwame nodded absent-mindedly, his thoughts already on the future. But Ya, with her last breath, made a final wish. "If you do not honor my request, Kwame, you will lose everything." After Ya's passing, Kwame expected to finally have the life he dreamed of, rich, free, and untethered. But strange things began to happen. First, his crops began to fail. The lush fields that had once been the pride of the village were now barren, no matter how hard the workers tried to tend them. Next, the livestock grew sick, many of them dying for no apparent reason. Finally, Kwame's health began to decline. He developed a persistent cough, his once strong body weakening day by day. Desperate, Kwame sought out a local diviner, a wise woman known for her knowledge of the spiritual world. The diviner listened to Kwame's story, and after a long silence, she spoke. "Ya's spirit is angry," the diviner said. "She gave you everything, but you have dishonored her memory. You did not fulfill her final wish, and now you are cursed. If you do not change your ways, you will lose everything." Kwame's heart sank. He realized too late that his greed had brought this upon him. He had married for money, but in doing so, he had lost something far more valuable: his integrity, his honor, and the trust of those around him. With nothing left but the remnants of Ya's wealth, Kwame decided to fulfill her last wish. He used the remaining money to help the poor in the village, providing food for the hungry and shelter for the homeless. He took care of Ya's family, ensuring that they were provided for. Though his wealth was now gone, he found a strange sense of peace in doing good. Over time, the villagers began to forgive Kwame, though they never forgot the mistakes he had made. He was no longer the proud young man who had once flaunted his riches. Instead, he became humble, learning that true wealth comes not from gold or silver, but from the heart. Kwame lost the riches he had once craved, but in the end, he gained something far more valuable: wisdom. And so, the story of Kwame and Ya is told as a reminder to all who listen. Greed leads only to sorrow, but kindness and love are the true treasures that last a lifetime.